All right, top 5 list, top 5 games of the season. This was the toughest list to put together of the top 5 lists that we had on the show. And again, if you guys want to give your top 5 list, we're taking calls, 342-9904, 342-9904. All right, Ben, start us off.
Number 5 for me, again, this was the toughest list to come up with 5 good games because a lot of the games were blowouts for Alabama. But looking down their schedule, for me, it's still got to be the third Saturday in October as number 5. I mean, to go out and rout your rival again, 45-7. What is that, 11 in a row? I'm losing count.
I'm on my toes now.
It's been, pre-iPhone was the last time that they defeated.
What were you doing 11 years ago? Does anyone know?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to remember. But, look, and it's only a matter of time, I think, before they start turning it around again up in Knoxville, so you got to enjoy these. But the 45-7 blowout, that's number 5 on my list this year.
This is something that I'm going to tell everyone out there because we've had to talk to Mike Johnson, who's the 3rd member of our team for the Tide Tailgate Show. But in this room here in Stats, I think everyone kind of remembers these days. But, Ben, when we were in college, when I was in undergrad at Alabama, we didn't beat Tennessee. Peyton Manning, T. Martin.
Jason Witten.
I was at the game where Jason Witten was dragging all the Travis running backs. Yeah. You know, like, Jason Witten carrying guys down the field. You're yelling at Mike Dubose like, "Hey, are you going to ever cover the tight end?" I mean, it was awful, right? Even in '99, when Alabama won the SEC, they lost to Tennessee, and Philip Fulmer was the coach, and he coached a lot like Nick Saban. I mean, it was just good fundamental football. But on my top 5 list, that's number 5, 45-7, 11 straight wins. I still think that the Vols are a rival. I still think that's a big game, and I got a lot of respect for Tennessee, good people up there in Knoxville and the Volunteer State. And I also know that they're a sleeping giant. They can be really good. So Alabama beating them, hey, I'm happy about that. Number 5 on my list.
Number 4 for me, we forget about this game because of the way the season went down in Tallahassee, but Florida State, the 24-7 win to open the season against number 3 Florida State at the time. We talked about the momentum shift when Damon Harris blocked the punt. A great second half for Alabama, but for Florida State, the season went awry, and it kind of affected the perception of Alabama when it came to the playoff. Didn't keep them out, though. That's number 4 for me, that opening night win in Atlanta.
A couple of haters. There's a couple of haters out there. Look, listening to the national media hate on Alabama for that Florida State win was ridiculous. Alabama didn't play Florida State with a backup quarterback and everyone injured and the season down the toilet. They played Florida State ranked 3rd in the country. That was a different team, and they should have gotten a lot more credit than they did from the national media. That's not what I have as the number 4 game. I'll talk about that one later. Number 4 on Mick's list is LSU. It was a 24-10 win. My favorite thing about it is when Ed Orgeron was in the press conference after the game and kind of grumbling about, we're back. We're back. You just got your butt kicked. Don't tell me about how you're back when you lost 24-10 and you had one broken play touchdown run. Alabama should have beaten them a lot worse than 24-10. LSU hasn't beaten the Tide since Alabama went to
New Orleans,
right? In
the BCS National Championship game.
Right, and won that game. And they've dominated LSU since 24-10. The domination continues. It's going to be a tough game anytime Alabama plays LSU. It was a really physical game this year, and it cost Alabama because there were some guys that were knocked up in that game, just different plays on the field and, injuries and all that stuff. But I thought that was number 4.
I strongly consider that game, Mick, for my list, but it didn't quite cut it. For me, number 3 was maybe Alabama's best all-around performance in a number of years. That was the win in Nashville against Vanderbilt. Alabama went out and dominated every facet of that ball game in a 59-0 win. It could have been worse. Alabama only scored 7 points in the final quarter and took a knee as they were going in again. First downs, Alabama had 38 and allowed just 3 for Vanderbilt. Total yards, 677 to 78. I mean, everything they did was perfect that day, and it was probably their best game I've seen them play in a long time.
Yeah, and you got to remember, too, Vanderbilt was coming off of a win over a top 25 team. And it was like the first time that they had beaten a top 25 team out of conference in 100 years or something. I mean, it was, they beat Kansas State. It's a pretty good team.
Right. They were feeling good.
And I thought that they they were talking a little bit of smack going into that one as well. It was all Alabama, though. My number 3 game was Alabama's close win against Texas A&M. Really shouldn't have been a close game. That's when I realized Alabama had a big lead. A&M kind of came back at the end because Alabama just kind of faded in the fourth quarter. And A&M made a couple plays. It was a 27-19 final. Didn't look good. I had a feeling that Alabama was going to have some trouble on the road at that point. But still, you got to win the football game, and this was a team we talked about at the beginning that was missing some of the key players. They lost a lot of guys off of that team from a year ago on defense. And, and it's a hostile environment. In that part of the season, we know Texas A&M is always a top 5 team at the beginning of the year. It's after Alabama beats them that they fall apart.
Right.
And it happened again this year, and they fired their coach.
Number 2 on my list might surprise you a little bit. That's a game we watched right here, Pearl River Resort. Mississippi State's my number 2 game of the season.
It is a surprise.
It is a surprise, right? And you'll see why in a second. But that Mississippi State game, Jalen Hurts really carried the team down the stretch. Made some big throws, some big third down conversions, and then hit Devontae Smith for that 26-yard touchdown to pull out the victory. And as you called at the time, while we were doing the post-game show here in Stats till, 1 o'clock in the morning or so, that Alabama was going to be in the college football playoff after that win, and they were.
I was right. But that's not my number 2 game on the list. Number 2 on Mick's list is the Florida State game, 24-7. Ranked 3rd at the time. I talked about it a second ago. Look, that was a big game. And it was the biggest game coming into the season. I mean, that's all we talked about.
Yeah.
The entire offseason, all of the hype was this Alabama-Florida State game. Mike Johnson, you remember him?
I do.
He works with us on the.
It's been a few weeks, but yeah.
He's on pre and post game with us on the game day all day shows. Played at Alabama. Wears a big championship ring from 2009. Spent time in the NFL. He's from Pensacola, Florida. He told me that he would give up every other game to win that one. He's like, because we don't play him enough. He said, if we lose, we're going to have to hear it all the time. Big Chris Bengal, you know him.
The family.
Mike's cousin.
Yeah, the family.
Mike's other cousin, Bengal's brother, is a Florida State fan. I mean, these two Goliaths are going to tangle over this game. So it was a big game. Maybe not now in retrospect because of the way Florida State's season turned out. But you know what? When Francois, their quarterback, was injured, it really changed the trajectory of what they had going.
Right. That was a great game. Number 1 on my list. See, I thought outside of the box like you did earlier in this show with some of your lists. Number 1, the biggest game of the season for Alabama, the Big Ten championship game. Ohio State's win over Wisconsin. It turned out to be the perfect scenario for Alabama to get them in the playoff because Ohio State won the game. They didn't look great doing it. They snuck out the victory over Wisconsin, kept it close, and that gave Alabama the opening it needed to make the playoff. That's number 1 for me.
That's weird. My number 1 game was when Ohio State lost to Iowa.
Is it?
By 31. No, I'm just kidding.
I know which game you have number 1.
Yeah, look, I get it, though. Like, that turned out to be the perfect scenario, and it's – I don't know what Nick Saban has in his bag of tricks, but it always seems like everything unfolds exactly the way that it's supposed to get Alabama into these championship games, Lose the game of the century to LSU, get a chance, beat them in the college football championship game, the BCS game. You get that year where Johnny Manziel beat Alabama, and then like 10 teams lost at the end, and Alabama got in, And this year it was the combination of Ohio State absolutely getting demolished by Iowa, and then that championship game where they won, but they didn't do it convincingly. So I agree with you. That's a good one, but it's not an Alabama game. The number 1 game of the season, Ben, by far, was the Mississippi State game. And we watched it here. I saw you take down about 30 wings upstairs at timeout, right? Is that what it's called, timeout? Yeah. You were in there. You had all those wings.
You're mistaking me for Ramey, I believe. But
we
had a great time.
I knocked Ramey's drink over.
You did.
His Coke.
Right onto his pizza. It was quite the night.
So Marquise was throwing those bottle caps. We had fun. We had a fun time. Bradley was there. I mean, and I had to go upstairs into my room, which is, by the way, the rooms here are fantastic. Okay, and I had to go back up into my luxurious room over at the Moon, and watched the final like 5 minutes by myself. It was just too intense.
You did disappear.
Half of the bar was barking, and the other half was rolling, and I'm just like, I got to get out. It's so fun. And Alabama won the football game at the end. So, and that game, and it got them it got them in. And I said it in this exact spot. I said, look, they're getting in. Even if they lose to Auburn, they are going to get in. I had that feeling, and it turned out that way.
It did. That's a good number one, Mick. We had a little disagreement, but that was definitely the biggest Alabama game of the season.